Hello, this is Kalesh and welcome to my channel. In this video, we will see some brief introduction of virtualization and hypervisors, and then we will follow setting up labs with the different virtualization tools. And let us continue further without any delay. Before we dive into setting up labs using virtualization tools, let us understand the basic concept behind virtualization and why it's essential for IT professionals. First of all, what is virtualization? So, being as IT professional, we mostly hear about virtualization on many occasions. Basically, in common terms, virtualization is the creation of a virtual rather than actual version of something. OS, which means operating system, a server, or a storage device, or a network resources, etc. So, what is hypervisor and is it same as virtualization? Hypervisor and virtualization are closely related terms, but they refer to different aspects of the virtualization technology. Basically, virtualization is something like we are going to create some virtual instances, and hypervisor is a software which is going to help us to create those instances. So that's the basic difference between virtualization and hypervisor. And basically, this virtualization allows us to create multiple virtual instances, and it will be very useful in different aspects like testing environment and development environment and for training purposes. And also, it is very helpful to run multiple operating systems without the need for separate hardware. So basically, when we say it doesn't require separate hardware, how this virtualization is going to work is something like we will have a physical hardware, single server or single laptop. And on top of that, we will be having a hypervisor. It's something like a software is running on the hardware, whether it's on the OS or bare metal hardware. So that hypervisor is going to give us some platform to create these virtual instances, which we call as virtual machines. So this is how the virtualization works, even though it's a VMware or Oracle VirtualBox or a Hyper-V, something different tools. It's a basic concept of virtualization is this. And before going to set up our virtualization tools or virtual labs on our devices, let us see some key benefits of this virtualization. So basically, setting up any IT environment or when we are setting up some test environment, the main thing what we will be thinking about is the resource utilization. So whenever some application or some server is running on a physical host, it may not be utilizing the 100% of hardware. Let's say the application in peak hours, it may be utilizing 100% and it may require more than that. And non-peak hours, it may be utilizing just 1% or 10% or 20%, and remaining 80% is not in use. So for peak hours, if we want to extend and remaining hours we are not going to use that, and which is going to have more cost on us, but we are not utilizing those resources. So that's where this virtualization will be helpful for us, like instead of using dedicated separate physical machines for each task, virtualization enables us to use the same hardware for various purposes, optimizing resource utilization. The main thing is isolation and security. If you are doing some testing or development activities, we will have some blocking points, or we may have some security concerns. So something like it should not contact to the network, or it should not contact to the outside of our laptop, or it should not contact to the from that application to outside world. So something like that. So in that type of scenarios, we can isolate that virtual machine, and even we can satisfy the security justification as well. So the next thing is something like after resource utilization and isolation, and we will be having something like when we are trying to set up some environment, or when we try to upgrade something, we there are some chances that application is going to crash, or the operating system may crash because of some malfunctions or some unwanted changes on that host. So in that scenario, we have to revert back completely from scratch. If we don't have any backups, or even if you have backups like a data backup or something, you have to build it from scratch and a traditional IT environment. That means in past, before virtualization, we had to build completely from scratch. Let's say we had to build the server, we had to install the OS, and then we have to install the dependencies, and then we have to install the application, and then we have to give to the production. Here, we are consuming the time. I mean, it's taking a lot of time to rebuild, and even the application will be down, and the customer will not be happy, and the client will not be happy, and that's a major drawback of having the traditional IT when something crashes. So when you use virtualization technology or virtualization tools or virtual servers, we can create some snapshots for that. And before going for any changes on the application or operating system, you can create a snapshot. And if something goes wrong, you found that this is not going to work as expected, you can revert it back using that snapshot in fraction of minutes or seconds. So that's where we are saving our time, and we are building the application back to last working condition in less time, and we are giving less downtime to the client. So that is a very big positive sign of using these virtualization tools. And then the easy replication, if you want to spin up the similar type of virtual missions, you can some type of templates in the virtualization technology with pre-configurations, like having some basic tools or configurations, everything built. And from that templates, you can spin the virtual missions in very faster way. And virtualization reduces the need for physical hardware, which can be cost effective, especially for personal labs or small scale testing environments. So for economical setups, we can use this. So if you want to have some test environment, and if you want to build some personal labs, so this virtualization technology will be very helpful, so that you can set up your labs or test environments without having to spend more cost on that. Like for every application, we doesn't require to set up different physical hardware, where you can have one host, and from there you can spin up your virtual environment. If required, you can upgrade the memory for that or hardware for that on the single node, instead of spending a lot of money on different physical hardware. So that's some key benefits of virtualization, and some basic introduction to the virtualization and hypervisor, just which is required for this lab setup, and then some key benefits of this virtualization technology. If we want to set up some virtual labs, we have to enable the virtualization on our devices from BIOS level. So before setting up the labs, let's see how to enable this virtualization. And before enabling virtualization, normally we might have heard, like, if you are already aware of hypervisor and all those things, there are two types of hypervisors, normally, which we call type 1 and type 2. The one hypervisor will be something like a hosted hypervisor, and other one is something like bare metal hypervisor. So the hosted hypervisor is something like, on the hardware, we will be having some base OS will be running it. Let's say it's a Linux or Windows, something will be running. On top of that, we'll have some hypervisor software is installed, and from there we will use the virtualization technology. That's one type of hypervisor. And the second type of hypervisor is on your bare metal server, you will be having some hypervisor installed. There will be no OS running, uh, like other type of hypervisor. So on your bare metal, that means on your server directly, the hypervisor software will be running, and then from there we will be using this virtualization. One of the hypervisor which is used on bare metal is ESXi, which we can give best example for that. And there we will be using something like vCenter, and to manage the servers and everything in the centralized environment. So that's a just basic difference for hyper types of hypervisors for you. And it doesn't require to have the knowledge of these type of hypervisors to set up the virtual labs on your system. I just wanted to give some basic information about these two types. And we will be mostly working on hosted hypervisors, which where I will be OS will be running on my laptop, and on top of that OS, I will be running hypervisor tools, something hypervisor software, something like VMware Workstation, Oracle VirtualBox, or Hyper-V, Microsoft Hyper-V, something like that. So that's about the introduction part, and let us go ahead and let's see how we can enable the virtualization on our devices. For now, I'm using Lenovo ThinkPad for my training purpose, so I'm just showing how to enable virtualization on Lenovo ThinkPad. It will all other devices also it requires to enable the BIOS, but here and there the options will be minor different to enable the virtualization, but you have to do this if you want to use your virtualization tools on your voice. Normally in Lenovo ThinkPad, when when we are starting the OS, you can just press F1, which will take us to BIOS level. And in BIOS level, you have to go to the security option, and then you can enable the virtualization from there. It will be something like this. When you enter into BIOS, you will have something like ThinkPad Lenovo BIOS settings, and then if you go to security, you can see that virtualization, and here these two should be enabled: Intel virtualization technology, Intel VTD feature. So when these two are enabled, then only you can use properly this virtualization tools from your operating system. So once you save and exit, your BIOS settings will be saved with virtualization enabled. So that's the basics how to enable the virtualization. And once the virtualization is enabled, we can go back to the we can load our OS, and then we can install VMware Workstation or Oracle VirtualBox or Microsoft Hyper-V, all all those things. So now we got some idea of virtualization and hypervisor. Basically, we use multiple virtualization tools to set up our labs on our devices, something like Hyper-V from Microsoft and VMware Workstation from VMware and Oracle VirtualBox, so one of the Oracle tool, and then KVM, which will be used on Linux OS. And there are many more virtualization tools. I mean, there are multiple virtualization tools other than this which can be used, but these are mostly used for our testing purpose and lab purposes. So in this, Oracle VirtualBox is free to use without any license purchase, but VMware Workstation is required a license to purchase from VMware. And Microsoft Hyper-V is available on Pro or Enterprise versions of Microsoft Windows. And as per my knowledge, Hyper-V is introduced with Windows 10 onwards. So for now, we will see how to set up labs using Microsoft Hyper-V, Oracle VirtualBox, and VMware Workstation on our devices, which will be used in most of the cases. And in recent days, we have seen that Microsoft has given something like Windows subsystem for Linux. I will try to explain about the same in this series of videos, how to use this WSL. Normally we'll call as WSL, which is Windows subsystem for Linux. So you can just spin up like Ubuntu or Debian system on your base mission without having any Oracle VirtualBox or VMware Workstation or Hyper-V. You can run that as a you will be able to access that as well with the WSL, and you can do some testing, scripting on your systems using that. So that's all for now, and we will continue our session to set up our lab using these virtualization tools. I hope this video is informative, and if you have any queries, please do let me know in the comment section. I will try to clarify your doubts, or I will try to give some information on your queries as soon as possible. Thank you.